Hey everybody, it's Chris, and tonight we're going to be doing a disc comparison, but first I want to stop and apologize. I know it's been a while since I put a video out. My previous computer kind of died, or is dying, but editing was becoming quite a chore. And the new computer, there's a little bit of shenanigans going on with getting that new one in. So, that said, we're back to videoing. I've actually had this footage in stock for a while, been waiting to put it together. Tonight we're going to be looking at the Culverin, the Fortress, and the Getaway. Now there are some other discs we could probably include in this comparison, but you can go back to my other comparison videos or other reviews and see how they flew versus one of these, or compared to one of these three discs, and go from there. These three are pretty similar. These are the three that most people are going to ask about, so that's why we're including these three. So what are they? Well, they're all 2-centimeter rim fairway control drivers. I'm going to put them in the control because they're a little bit faster, and they bleed distance-wise into that distance range. In fact, you're going to hear a lot of slower arm throwers, like 350 sub-350 throwers, say these things go just as far as their drivers, and there's a reason for that. They're slightly overstable, so you can throw them hard, you can tip them over, you're going to get that extended S flight out of them, and they're going to glide pretty well. All three of them glide decently. So what is my experience with it? Well, I am going to start by saying, of the three, the Fortress feels the most like a driver in my hand, and I know that sounds weird, but to me it feels the most driver-like in the hand, and it was also the most overstable of the three. I can throw this one, and you're going to see him put on similar lines. This one corrects a little bit faster when tipped, and starts to hyzer a little bit faster. It's going to end up left of the group, most left of the group, most often, as long as I didn't tip it more than the other two. Of the Getaway and the Culverin, this is a lot finer of a distinction, especially under 330 feet. All three of these discs are going to act pretty similar at that speed and lower. Over 330 feet is where the difference in this disc really starts to kick in. Under, they're landing almost on top of each other pretty regularly. Over, you're going to see this. I found the Getaway just had a little more high-speed stability, maybe a little bit heavier fade, but it could just be the high-speed stability that was affecting it. So this one was more regularly going to end up left of the Culverin. Distance-wise, for me, they all go similar distances. There's something about the Getaway that when I throw it at a certain speed, if I can hit that speed, it just seems like it gets an extra 20 feet or 30 feet, and it's really weird. But otherwise, these things are all pretty similar grouping distance-wise for me. All are very usable. If you have a strong preference for one, hey, that works. I think you can get the job done in this slot. Somewhat overstable. It's not Audi, again, not Audi Felon overstable, but fairly overstable. You're going to get a nice straight flight with an overstable finish out of any one of the three. So if one of them works for you, awesome. If you want to look at the other two, here's a good comparison to start that or a good comparison tool to start that with. As always, if you have questions or comments, please put them below so I can get back to you. I look forward to interacting with you guys. It's been a little while, and we'll go to the video. As always, thanks for watching. To get started, the first three videos are going to be 2 throws each of each disc compared to the other two. Here you get to see the Getaway and the Culverin. You're going to see both of them start fairly. The Getaway starts a little more turned over, but you're going to see that stability kick in and bring it down hard left, whereas the Culverin actually flies a little bit farther straight before fading gently. In the second comparison, again, this is the same Getaway throw, so you're going to see it do the exact same tilt. You're going to see the Fortress thrown in a very similar line, but it never tips at all. It stays very flat, very straight. And you're going to see it cut down way farther to the left. And this is a left sloping hill, so it's exaggerated, but you can see that extra fade on the Fortress here. And here again is the Fortress and the Culverin from the first video. Culverin again, very straight line. You're going to see a little bit of turn late on the Culverin before it begins fading. Both of these discs go decent distance, with the Fortress having a heavier fade. To begin the comparisons, we're going to start with the Getaway and the Culverin. Very similar discs in feel in the hand and distance-wise. Here we're going to do a forced turnover. You're going to see just a little more tilt on the Getaway and some more height as well. The Culverin's going to drift very naturally and finish just right of the basket and behind it, whereas the Getaway is going to stall out with that higher height, hit the tray, and just drop right below. The second is again another forced turnover. Not as successfully thrown. It's not as high. It wasn't turned as hard. We are going to see that the Culverin has a little bit later turn, whereas the Getaway was thrown just a little more tilted. Culverin will finish a little more left. Just slight differences in the flight from both of them. Here this is just a simple, I'm going to throw it slightly high, right of the basket, let the natural stability of the disc and the natural fade from the height bring it back to the pin. You're going to see a slightly harder fade out of the Getaway. Part of that's due to the height, and I do think there's just a touch more fade to it as well. Going out to the field, one hard throw with some height. You're going to see the Getaway is tilted just a little more. It's going to start it's going to drift right at the beginning and then fade hard left over the top of the basket, whereas the Culverin had a little bit later turn to the right side of the trees where it will fade to the right side of the pin. For the second set of comparisons, we're going to go Fortress versus Culverin. Here again is that high turnover shot. In fairness, the Fortress was thrown nose up, but even on the clean shot I didn't get on camera, it does flatten out and fade much harder than the Culverin or the Getaway did. Culverin ends up right side of the basket. Here out in the field, you got some weird crosswinds going on this pair of throws. The Culverin, if you watch, is just going to stay low. It's just going to keep holding that slightly right line the entire time, whereas the Fortress gets pushed down and right a little bit, but you'll see the stability kick in where it fades toward the basket at the end. And one final comparison in the field, again, thrown hard. You'll see the Fortress is tipped, fades out, or tips over just a little bit before catching the stability and fading hard toward the basket, where that Culverin held a much straighter line the entire time. And our last set of comparisons will be Getaway and Fortress. Here on that low line drive turnover, you're going to see it. I did force the Getaway just a little bit more, which is going to account for some of the extra turn. But again, that extra stability of the Fortress, it just stands up, flattens out, and fades a lot faster than either the Getaway or the Culverin are going to. Again, it is going to be the most overstable of the group in my experience. Here's an example of that. Fortress is not thrown as high, it's just thrown a little more outside, and it's going to hold hyzer almost the entire way to get into the side of the hill next to the basket, whereas the Getaway with that extra height is going to fade just past the Fortress. And that's pretty normal. I got a little bit extra distance out of the Getaway over the Fortress. If they were thrown on similar lines, the extra glide, I could manipulate the Fortress to get it extra as well. Here in this comparison, you can see as soon as I threw it, the Fortress is already starts to turn left a lot faster, but they did end up in similar spots. And this was a great shot of both of them. Again, weird winds and forcing them over. You can see just how hard I turned the Fortress, and that wind just keeps pushing it. The Fortress throw here was one of the longest of the day, and the Getaway would have been long, but it does hit the tree and get knocked down. I did mention that I was going to bring up a couple different plastics besides the main comparison. So first up is the hybrid Getaway. The Getaways that I've tested have been just a touch less overstable than the Lucid, which allows me to flex them a bit easier. Also gives me just a little bit straighter line on a normal throw, and a touch more distance. Great 1-2 punch with the Lucid. And then there's the TP Fortress. Now the TP Fortress still has a nice fade, but as you can see here, quite a bit less high-speed stability. I'm able to hold the turnover lines, or I'm allowed to just throw it hard, expect it to turn out a little bit to the right, and then come back with that nice fade at the end. So again, here's that drift out to the side, and then that hard fade finish. So there's a couple different plastics that you might want to consider as well, besides the main comparison. To wrap up, the Fortress, Culverin, and Getaway are all 2 cm rim control drivers that are moderately, or maybe even more than moderately overstable in case of the Fortress, which is the most overstable of the group. The Getaway is in the middle, but definitely closer to the Culverin in flight. If you found this video helpful or informative, please feel free to like it, share it, give it a thumbs up, or even subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching.